Hey, everybody. Welcome to Odd and Untold, the podcast where we talk about all things strange and spooky. And this week, I have a special guest with me. Is a listener of the show named Josh, and he's got some Bigfoot stories he's going to share with us and maybe another paranormal story. And Josh, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciated you reaching out to me and emailing me. I think you had said you'd seen my episode on Bigfoot in York County, York and Lancaster.
Yep.
And yeah, we spoke last week on the phone, and you shared some stories, and I asked you if you'd come on the show and share them. So yeah, thank you for coming on. And I don't know if you want. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself before we get into your stories,
Yeah.
just so they have a little frame of reference?
Yeah. So like you said, I podcast. I'm in the York area, grew up in the
Mhm.
York area. Go to Lancaster a lot. It's a very familiar area for me. I enjoy getting outside. I grew up doing a lot of that just around my house. There's a lot of woods. I would go with some friends. We'd build forts, the typical guy stuff, I guess.
Mhm.
And it was never really something that the cryptic area was never something that I thought about. I'd
Mhm.
go in the woods and it'd be like the middle of the night. I've gone to abandoned houses by myself and you know, I didn't think anything of it. I was like, this is probably, somebody's probably here I don't want to meet, but that was all I thought and I still did it.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get into this until probably a couple of years ago, maybe year and a half, 2 years, I'd say, listening to podcasts at work because I got a job, have to sit at a desk and all that. You got to figure out a way to help pass the time sometimes.
Oh yeah.
So I started listening to a bunch of podcasts, and then I started to had to offer, and that was very recent, probably the last couple of months, and that's how I stumbled upon your podcast because I was just putting in Susquehanna or Lancaster or York, um, kind of those keywords, and seeing what's out there.
Okay, so then you were looking for like Pennsylvania Bigfoot sightings, and you found my show. That's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I listened to a couple of your episodes. And then it's within that podcast, there were some that I was actually familiar with. And then I had done some just digging around. I think it was like the BFRO website,
mhm.
that there was some sightings on there that people would, you know, I guess that I don't know if it's still being updated, but it doesn't really seem like it. So looking, just trying to do my own research into some local, stories, and none of them seemed really up to date. You get one here and there, but the credibility, it's hard to. There's no consistency. Um, there was a couple stories that I had heard that were interesting that seemed to track with some consistency. They were a while ago. I don't really remember them. Um, but then I realized, maybe my story, my friend's story, there might be a lot more of those.
Mhm.
Um, and that's kind of why I was like, I'm gonna just reach out and see, because like I never would have considered reporting this. It's just one of those things where like I don't know.
Right, right.
That's that's a little bit sort of like how I got here over the past couple of years.
All right, cool. So, do you want to go into like your experience? And I know you had a friend who had an experience too, and I think they're both interesting, and we can talk about why after. But I'd love to just hear your story again and your friend's story.
Yeah, yeah. So my my story starts couple. I think I was probably 16 or 17, I'd say, and so it's probably about 9-ish years ago, which
Hmm.
is crazy how it feels like it was yesterday. But my friends and I had this. We built a fort up in the woods, um, and when we were up there, we built this like a lean-to, and then we kind of just expanded into this hangout that we would go to all the time. And the brush was really dense. There's a low canopy area with the trees to kind of paint a picture is, you can't see more than maybe 20 or 30 yards, especially in the summer. It's probably even less than that. Like the shrubbery around it makes a perfect fort. Um, and it was a small portion of woods, and we had like a north and a south entrance. And I typically would go in from the south entrance, but my friends came in the north entrance. Which all that to say is, I thought that they were in the fort, but they were on the other side. So I came into the north entrance this time because I had my bike, and that was the easiest way to get in. It's close to twilight, and it's that weird lighting where it's like you can see, but you can't see. The sun is
Mhm.
set. It's not quite dark. And I'm pushing my bike in. It's like a deer trail is kind of what we wanted to keep it that way, so it didn't look too much like a human trail, and you had to kind of maneuver it in. So I'm crouched down under my bike, not under behind it, pushing it through the brush. It's getting stuck, you know, but I wanted it out of sight. And I see like this as I'm like halfway in the entrance. There's this like dark mass that just like runs in front of me, and I thought it was my friends, and because I started laughing. I was like, I saw you, you're not gonna trick me. But then I kind of like don't hear a response from them, and then I hear some chatter, maybe 100 yards away, which is where they were. And then I yelled. I was like, "Hey, where are you guys?" They're like, "Oh, we're on the other side." So I said, "So you're not right in front of me?" And they're like, no. And while this is happening, whatever ran in front of me, it was like, to me, it sounded like a deep breathing, grunting noise that I can't mimic. Like, I can't physically make that deep grunting sound. So in my mind, I'm like, well, that wasn't deer because I've spooked a deer. Going in the woods all the time, I spooked deer, and it's like an explosion, and then they're gone. You hear them
Mhm.
skip. You can hear every, skip as they run off, and then you'll see them. Um, the a bear in this area, bear is very rare. They do occasionally venture into this area. So whatever it was, its back that I saw was at least 4.5 feet above the ground. Um, but it was just a split second. And then it was just in the brush enough where I couldn't see it, but it felt like I was maybe 15 feet away. Like that's how
Mhm.
dense this was. And it was night, almost night. And it's just this breathing. And I'm talking to my friends. And then I decided I should probably get out. So
Yeah.
I backed up slowly, got my bike out, didn't run because I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking it's a bear still. And then I take off once I feel like I was far enough away in the open. Um, but that was the extent of the story. I went down and got them, and I was like freaking out. I was like, guys, I just saw a bear, and they're like, really? And then we went back to look, but we kept a distance, and
Mhm.
we didn't see anything leave because again, this is like surrounded by a field, so we didn't see anything up going anywhere. We would have seen something, um, but we didn't. We figured maybe there's a split second where it could have gotten away while we weren't looking. Um, but yeah, and it was years later, probably 6, 7 years later. I was like, well, maybe that wasn't a bear. I'm not saying I know. I'm not saying it was Bigfoot. I'm not saying I know what it was, but it was just strange because bears. There are people who go their whole lives living in bear country and not see a bear or rarely see a bear. And the bears that we get around here, you can count on one hand how many bears have been in this area in like a decade or two.
Mhm.
It's not common, and they're usually smaller black bears because there's just not enough food. And if there's a person near them, they're gonna want to run and disappear. If you spook them, they're gone. They're not gonna linger close to you. Obviously, unless there's cubs, but I think I would have known if there were cubs. And there was nothing in the news about it. I mean, there are people who live around here. No one had a bear on a trail camera. or the news. The news always airs it. So I started thinking about that later on, and I thought it's just strange. It's the only way I can kind of describe it.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, there's aspects of your story that are interesting to me because yeah, you're not seeing, a lot of people say, yeah, I saw Bigfoot and it was clearly humanoid, and like they get a really good look at it, and your view is kind of obscured, but there are aspects to the story that really make you wonder. Like one, you're saying this thing was what, like 4 or 5 feet tall at least?
Yeah, I would. It was that's the level that I saw it at
Mm-hmm.
because that's how I was crouched down.
Right.
So that's what I could see. But the mass moving from my right side to the left side, it seemed longer. Like it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like there was a length. So either it would be a bear's length or a hunched over kind of humanoid like figure.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just the only thing that I can specifically say is that I saw a mass and I was at the 4 foot level being crouched over and I was at that level.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, and the black bear here on the East Coast, like they don't get that big. Um,
Hmm.
and you and I talked about this on the phone last week. About how bears, black bear are basically like they're like big dogs, and if you're yelling for your friends, you're moving a bike uphill. You're not being quiet. You're a teenager. You're moving your bike uphill. Now you're yelling for your friends, and this thing is just in front of you. Typically black bear are going to run off. And if
Yeah.
it
And
was
it
a
would have
mom with
known where my friends were.
right, so it's I mean you're hearing their chatter, so the bear is probably hearing their chatter and is going to scram out of there. It's not going to stick around if there's people around.
Hmm.
And then it hears you coming, and again doesn't move off. Um, so that is weird. The deep grunting. I mean, I've had bears near my tent when camping. You can hear them breathing, but it's not anything unusual. It almost sounds like a guy just out of breath.
Yeah, yeah, like a maybe it sounds maybe like a strong man breathing. 'Cause,
Right,
there's a little bit of a grunt,
right.
even a frustrated bear, but it this sound is like burned into my memory. I wish I could like download it from my mind. It was and it wasn't an out of breath. It was like every exhale was like this, almost a growl grunt.
Hmm.
It, I mean, maybe it was like it was worked up, but I can't. But it wasn't like it was sniffing around or any bears that I've heard recordings, videos, even of bigger bears. It sounded deeper,
Hmm.
and that I specifically remember because that's what freaked me out. Like things would run past us all the time. We would have coyotes around us, and like you kind of figure something is following you. Coyotes just do that, but this was like the noise and the breathing, deep, like, guttural exhaling that I was hearing was like that was the part that really got me. If I didn't hear that, I probably would have just said, "Oh, maybe it was a bear by its
Right.
size," or something along those lines. But definitely not a deer. They don't make those. They snort, but they don't quite make this deep of a noise.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
not
did
even
you?
gonna attempt to make that noise.
Yeah. Did you see it move off or anything, or was it just because you said it kind of crossed in front of you? Then did you see it leave, or did you get out of there and it was still just kind of hanging out there?
It never gave any ground. So like I made the first move back. I was in there a while. Like it wasn't like oh I hear it and then back up.
Hmm.
If I could give the best play by play, it would be so we have this path. There's a path that leads up to it in a field, and then you take this immediate turn, and it's just thick brush. So if you can picture, you know, some shrubs, brush, and then you have some trees, and trees are only between 15 and 20 feet,
Hmm.
maybe 25 feet tall, because it's just they're in this field. They're not growing for competition of sunlight, so they're really dense.
Hmm.
And Um, we have the vines going across. And then on the left hand side, there was an even thicker bush. I don't know what it was. There was like a dump pile there of some brush. That was it was just there for a long time, and stuff would pile up and grow around it, more like thorns. And that was the dark area, the extra dark area. So on the right hand side is where our fort was, and further down is where my friends were on the right hand side. And this thing came from the right, and it moved from right to left in front of me. And there's a small clearing in front of where I was,
Hmm.
and where it moved to my left was behind thicker brush that was darker, and I couldn't see over there. If it stayed right in front of me, I could have seen it. But it moved from the right, which was a little bit thicker, and then in front of me where it was thinner is where I saw it, and then it was very thick to the left. And it within like like a half a second, it was over.
Mm.
And it was probably a good minute that I was from me pushing my bike in to when it ran across. From it running across and me being stuck with my bike was probably a solid minute, because it took me a couple of seconds because I thought my friends were making this noise.
Mm.
And then I realized, I was like, there's no way my friends are making this noise. And
Yeah.
then for me to be able to back out slowly, because I mean, I am lower than my bike at this point now, trying to get in. So now I got to back out, but I
Right.
don't want to turn my back. So it was a solid minute that it was there. It wasn't backing up slowly. It wasn't moving away. It was keeping that constant, harsh breathing until I backed up. And as soon as I backed up and I was away from it to the point where I was in the open of the field and got on my bike and was gone,
Hmm.
I don't know what happened after that. We came back, and my friend, he didn't go through it, so he wasn't as, you know, scared as I was.
Right.
He got up to it and he didn't hear anything. He didn't see anything. He said he saw something move back in the brush, but I don't know. I don't know if he's just saying that to say that, but we didn't see anything after that. But it was a long exposure. It wasn't, typically something's going to give first. And usually, even if a person starts backing up, the animal is going to be gone. That they're going to want to get out of there. But it just stood there, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, and you had told me last week too that you guys kept food in the fort too as well, right?
We we didn't keep it there. We would bring it up, and we would, so because, and I can't remember how recent we did have food up there. I kind of remember we might have had either it was bacon, bacon, steak, and or Bush's baked beans.
Hmm.
We might that I don't remember that timeline specifically of when.
Okay.
I think it was within that week,
Hmm.
but that's not the first time that we've done that and had food
Right.
up there.
Right.
Um, so I mean,
But like the fort
if there
itself
was,
wasn't disturbed or anything, right?
no, we went back up and there was nothing disturbed. We had some stuff up there, that we would use. And nothing, like you wouldn't have known that anything was up there. I did go back the next day, and I just it smelled like a musty fur.
Hmm.
It did. I do remember that. That was a noticeable thing. The next day, it was like lingering there. Couldn't
Wow.
find any footprints. There might have been some imprints that were large, but this area was a very rocky soil, a lot of roots because it was so dense.
Hmm.
Like we couldn't even you couldn't dig more than a couple inches there before hitting big roots and stuff. So there was no good imprint area.
Yeah, and most people will ask that, did you find any prints? And they don't realize that, I mean, most ground, unless it's like really wet and muddy, it's not going to capture footprints
Hmm.
real well,
Yeah.
and if it does, it's going to be very faint and that'll be gone within minutes, probably just with a slight breeze.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm not a professional tracker, so I'm not gonna see a broken stick and determine like there are people who are really good at that, and we were teenagers. We probably, if there was any evidence, we probably destroyed it by looking for
right,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, and stories like this are interesting to me because it's not sensational. It's not a very clear look, but there's aspects of it. And I like that you say, like, I'm not saying it was Bigfoot. It was just strange. And
Hmm.
I like stories like that are strange because animals have predictability. They act in certain ways. They're seen in certain places. Uh, and sometimes our brains just know like something is off about this. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot. I'm not saying it's paranormal. It's just weird. And I had done an episode early on in the podcast about an encounter that my friend Josh, also named Josh, had up in the Adirondacks, and it was very similar to what you're describing here. Like something came into our camp as we're talking loudly. We have a roaring fire going,
Hmm.
and we had a dog with us. And this thing comes into camp. You can hear it just crashing through. It was not trying to be quiet. And it stands off maybe 45 feet from us, just watching us for like 6 minutes, 6 or 7 minutes. We didn't see it. We just saw the eyes blinking. You see the eye shine.
Yeah.
And we're yelling at this thing. We have big sticks because we were trying to like prop tarps over our tent from the night before because it was raining. And we had sticks and we're banging the sticks. And we had a dog with us, and the dog didn't move, which is unusual because usually when a dog is going to be protective. It's going to say, "Oh, something's coming into camp." And this thing was chasing every squirrel and every chipmunk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now this thing comes in, and the dog is just sitting there. It didn't even stand up. He was just sitting, and the ears are up, watching this thing. And we're just talking to each other like, maybe this is a bear, and we're gonna have to defend ourselves because it's not moving off. We're yelling and screaming. And again, black bears don't typically do this. They're not going to approach two big guys. We're both 6'1", to over 200 pounds. Uh,
Yeah.
and this thing would not move off. Finally, it did. Like I said, probably 6 or 7 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but that's an eternity when you're defending yourselves with pointy sticks, from an
Yeah.
animal.
10
And
seconds is 10 minutes.
yeah, exactly. And the next morning, we went and looked where this thing was because we could tell which tree it was. And
Hmm.
it, from our estimates, it was easily eight, like the eyes were like at the 8 foot level. So
Oh, yeah. I was
not,
going to
not,
say,
not a black bear,
no, no. I was going to say, if, looking at the eyes and if you knew where the tree matched, and that's to be able to say that you saw it at that level, even if you're off by a foot, that's tall.
That's still
Like,
tall. Yeah.
yeah,
And we said the same thing. Like, even if we're off a little bit, you're still talking even 7 feet tall. That's not a black bear. Black bear standing
no.
up is not going to be 7 feet tall. And it was funny because we were leaving the next morning and we said, you know what? Instead of doing a bear hang, let's leave the food like along where it came in. Like, if it wants the food, let it take the food. Better that than
Hmm.
coming into our camp. Because it was like the only trip that we were ever unarmed. Like, we always take a shotgun or
Yeah,
something with us. And this was the
yeah.
only trip where we're like, now we have the dog, like we'll be okay. Um, and the cooler was not disturbed. And we had like sausages, we had cheese, we had eggs, like smelly stuff that a bear, if it were a bear, like would come back and be like, oh, cool, free food.
That's what
Um,
it wants. Yeah.
so again, we also say the same thing. Like, we're not saying it's Bigfoot, but it did not act like a bear. It did not seem like a bear. It didn't do the typical bear stuff. So uh,
Hmm.
that's kind of why I like your story because it's that same sort of thing where it's like, yeah, I'm seeing something, and it just doesn't mesh with anything that should be in Pennsylvania at that
Right.
time.
If this was a different state in the middle of nowhere, maybe I would have thought less of it, like if it
Right.
was but being where it was and nobody else having any news about it, because I kept looking, I kept waiting, because we get a small bear here, it's in the news,
Mm-hmm.
so that's what makes it. And then you wonder how many other stories like that happen, and you just, you don't say think anything of it because you're like, oh, there's just I can just write it off like, oh, that was slightly strange, and on you go.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stories out there like that, and a lot of people like that who go out there and just something strange, and they're not thinking Bigfoot or whatever else paranormal, UFO or ghost or whatever it may be. They're
Right.
just saying, "Oh, that was a weird bear. That was a weird whatever," and they move on with their lives, and it sounds very much like what happened with you. Like, at the time, you weren't into Bigfoot or anything, so you're thinking that was a weird bear encounter, And then,
Hmm.
you get a little older and you look back on it and you're saying something about that isn't right. It doesn't really feel like a bear. It doesn't act like a bear. It doesn't sound like a bear. So was it a bear?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just that I grew up watching the Finding Bigfoot, and it just the way that they did stuff was not not really my from a scientific standpoint. It was kind of it kind of ruined it for me in my mind, and then I watched Les Stroud's uh, Survivor Man Bigfoot series
Mm-hmm.
and the stuff that he talked about, and I was like, okay, this brings a little more validity to it, and that's what got me thinking. Um, but yeah, yeah, and I think too, some people want to live in denial because I've heard many stories of, lifelong hunters who sell all their stuff and never go in the woods again, and guys who have been in wars and have seen things, and then this is something else, and that doesn't just happen.
Right. Yeah. We talked about this too, that like if you're a hunter, that's something you devote your life to that. That is your hobby. That is your passion. You wait for hunting season to open, you get all the gear. And then, yeah, to have somebody who's, been hunting for 30, 40 years to just give it up because I saw something
Yeah.
and I'm not going back out there. Doesn't matter what type of caliber weapon I have, doesn't like sell all my gear. I'm done. Uh,
Hmm.
it's just weird. But yeah, like you said, there are people who are in denial and they'll see something and like we said, yeah, I saw a strange bear. It got up on two legs and it ran off, and that's not what. Um, we
Yeah.
kind of talked about
Yeah.
that on our phone call too, and you have a friend story who's
Hmm.
like in that ballpark, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think on that note that about just kind of like passing it off, because yeah, I think I might have kind of done that too when I was younger, because that's what I did for fun. And as soon as you accept in your mind that that was not normal, it only takes one thing to not be normal to then question everything of,
Mm-hmm.
what is normal, what isn't, what, and then when you go out there again, you're like, this is a totally different landscape. And, it kind of like freaks you out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Hunters, if they see something that's not like definitive black and white right in their face, they might their mind might automatically change the story to be something less scary because it doesn't want them to, give up or accept and scare themselves out of doing, the thing that they've always done. Which kind of leads somewhat into this next story that happened years later, uh, probably 2, 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Same general area within maybe like a 10-mile radius. This was along the Susquehanna. I think it was north of 30 on the York side. I believe, but I know my friend was hunting with another friend. They're going out. I think it's like duck hunting, and he said that it was dark. They got there, before the sunlight, about 3 in the morning, I think. And there was this island. There's tons of islands on the Susquehanna, and there was this one close enough that you could like see it, but far enough away that deer aren't going out there even when it's low. Um, and he said that, and he texted me this, and usually he does. Our text messages are very vague. Two guys were just like,
Yeah.
"Hey, you want to do this? Yeah, sure. All right, 5 o'clock. Yep, cool."
Yep.
Like that. That's how he texts. But
Right.
this was, it was a little bit more behind these texts, and he was like freaked out. But I know he wasn't thinking what I was thinking. But the more he's telling me his story, I'm like, you do realize what this sounds like, right? And he was like, no, no, it is not that. And he was like denying it. So that just goes somewhat towards, for me, the credibility of what he saw, because he's like, no, it was not that. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't Bigfoot. And I said, I'm not saying it was Bigfoot, but I'm also like, what the heck? Uh, but so what happened was they, on this island, there's this log, and he described it as something crouched, something that got up, and then something took off. His crash got up, took off, crashing loud, again, sort of not really caring about what it was running through. It was going through some water. Um, and he said that when he described it as getting up. I was like, well, nothing gets up. Bears are the only thing that get up, and they're not getting up to run through water.
Right.
And he almost made it sound like it was watching and observing. Um, and they have guns, and he said that the hair on his back of his neck was like standing up. He was freaked out, and he was telling me this. Um, and I was like, wow, he actually seemed like concerned. So, I mean that's the story, and it was quick. I was trying to get more details out of him, but he knows what I think now, so he doesn't want to he doesn't want to tell me anything else.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know, that's an interesting story. I mean, a person's not going to be out on an island by themselves, crouched behind a log, staring at hunters. And the other thing too is if it's still dark, they're going to be able to see, because the water is going to be that early morning sun. They'll be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the dark, seeing the lighter part. Oh, it's open, not under the trees. But anything that's out in the lighter area won't be able to see them. I mean, that was kind of the idea of why they're going out at that
Right.
time to hunt that area. So a person who definitely you wouldn't see people crouching behind a whatever they were hiding behind to be stealthy. You wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
see them in the woods.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
But we hear stories like that all the time, that people see something crouched. They think it's a tree stump. They think it's a bush. They think it's a bear. They think it's just another animal. And then it stands up and then it runs. And that doesn't make sense. Yes. And we talked about this. A bear can rear up, usually to either reach food or maybe as an intimidation tactic, but
mhm.
they're not going to walk on two legs. Again, a
They're not
trained
stable.
circus bear or in a zoo might do that because they're trained and they're performing. But for a wild bear, that is like the least what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's not the most efficient way of moving. They
Hmm.
are quadrupeds. They're going to get down. If they're going to run off, they're going to run off on all fours. That's where they're powerful, not on their hind legs. So to just get up, as your friend is saying, this thing got up and then ran, especially in the dark. So again, even if you are assuming this is a person, a man in a ghillie suit, or whatever a skeptic might try to say, that uh, moving around in the dark, human eyesight is very poor in the dark, and to just be
Hmm.
to be crashing through the brush and making that much noise, like a human being goes and you get stuck with a thorn and you're like, oh, and you stop, like unless you're
Right.
running for your life. And why, if this were a person, why would they be running for their lives if they're way across on this island? And it, yeah,
Why
it's just
why are they there to begin with?
right. Why is it there at 3, 4 in the morning, just hanging out?
Yeah.
This just person just like, yeah, I'm just going to go hang out and hide behind this log on this random island. And I hope I don't get caught by hunt. Like, why? It just, so yeah, like,
And
it's like,
it's
go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying it's not illegal. I mean, if they were hunting there, you'd probably be like, hey, I'm over here. Don't shoot me. You know?
Yeah. That would be the
They
smart thing. Again, if the guy didn't have any like flash colors on, you yell out,
right.
hey, I'm a person. Don't shoot. I'm in a ghillie suit, or, I'm in camouflage. Uh, please don't shoot me if you see me. And then, oh, okay. The guys would put their guns down and wait to see what happened. Uh, and yeah, it's just, we talked about this too, the denial of certain people, that they'll tell you they saw something, they'll tell you they saw something strange, they'll tell you they were freaked out, but they don't want to say the word. They don't want to say Bigfoot. They don't want to say,
Right.
and that's always interesting to me, that it's like, yeah, he kind of knows what it sounds like. Like why would he even tell you this if he just thought this was a bear? He could just say, "Oh yeah, we ran into a bear this morning and it ran off." Oh, okay. But
Exactly. I mean, he was telling this like he was freaked out, and he just had to tell somebody because you got to tell somebody. But he also didn't want to acknowledge, which I get. Like I have my own theories behind which are more mainstream now than they were. Um, but most people, when they start with Bigfoot, hearing about it, it's like, oh, it's a big ape that's elusive. It's this elusive creature that could maybe it makes sense in some of the national forests. I mean, they have said, I mean, in the Survivor Man's, Les Stroud talks about how just look around you, look at the wilderness out here. Now, if you have a semi-smart creature who has a large span of distance that it can travel, there's no reason that, it could go its whole life without seeing somebody in some of those places
oh
out
yeah.
west. So I understand why people would start there, but and then you start getting into history all around the world, seeing and reporting the same thing over and over and over, and they had no means of communication. And it's like, now there is something there. Is it extinct? Is it not? But that's kind of besides the point. It's the stigma around it is you don't say that you believe in it, but it's always, do you believe in Bigfoot or not? Do you believe in aliens or not? It's not, well, here's an idea that's slightly different of
Mhm.
what I think it could be. And I think that just started maybe after COVID. It just started to kind of come to surface. Or maybe that's just when I started finding out about it, but it seems to be blowing up with a lot of the bigger podcasts
Yeah, and
lately.
I'm not sure where that's coming from. Because I think there's a lot to it that doesn't make sense when you look at it, and it's uh, the footprint tracks that just disappear in the middle of a field, or
Right.
like we've never found a dead body, or like how many guys have said they have shot at one of these and it just like my bullets had no effect on it. So there's a lot of like these weird aspects of it where if it were simply an animal, you'd think we'd come across a carcass at some point. I mean, again, like we talk about bears and you know, lots of people go into the woods and frequently, I mean, hunters have trouble finding bears sometimes. They're setting up trail cams and they're laying out bait and they still
Mm-hmm.
have trouble finding, an animal that we know exists in large populations. Um, so yeah, you have this Bigfoot thing that seems in many ways to be a physical being because it leaves tracks. People say they've seen it drinking water. They'll see it, eating fish or other animals, carrying deer. So, in the one sense, it sounds very much like a biological entity. And then you have the other aspects of it where, okay, well, why did the tracks just disappear in the middle of a field? I can understand along a muddy path, like, all right, you have a muddy patch where the footprints are, and then it gets dry again and you lose the footprints. But
Yeah.
in a giant mud field or in a snow field, you have these prints and then it'll just stop. So it's like, all right, if that were a hoaxer, did like a helicopter just come and pick them up? And
Right.
like, how did they get back? So there are these aspects of it that do seem a little bit more paranormal or supernatural. Uh, and then some people just take it very far and they'll just say, oh, it's portals and they're being dropped off by UFOs. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's going a little too far because like, how do we know that? And like I've said on the show before, I don't like the idea of explaining one unknown with another unknown. Like, well, what is Bigfoot? Oh, Bigfoot's dropped off here by aliens or interdimensional beings or portals. Or okay, well now we have to assume that portals exist or that aliens are real, and it just
Right.
starts leading down a path. But at the same time, I do think we need to be open to the fact that there's more here going on than we think because yeah, in the Pacific Northwest or in the Adirondacks or like these big swaths of just wilderness where there are no people, yeah, that's a little bit more believable than in, say, rural Pennsylvania, where like you said, you're kind of surrounded by fields. So where did this thing go? Uh, so it just raises like so many different questions, and like what you saw, like this
Hmm.
was not normal. You're not saying it's Bigfoot, and I love that, and I really respect that about you. That you're not just because some people just everything in the woods is Bigfoot. Oh, it's a twig snap, that's Bigfoot, and oh, there's a
Yeah.
broken branch off this tree, and it's 8 foot tall up on the tree, so it must have been Bigfoot. Um,
Hmm.
so I love that you are kind of just saying like, no, this was just strange, and after you got into Bigfoot, now you're saying, well, maybe that's kind of what I saw because it's big and it's hairy and it's grunting,
Right.
um, and it is not acting like a traditional black bear would, especially that there's not a big population of them out there. You think they'd be even more skittish because if this is just a bear sort of passing through, it's in unfamiliar territory. Um, and now here comes this guy with a bike and it's making noise and you're yelling for your friends. Like any typical black bear is just going to be like, nope, I'm out of here. I'm
Yeah.
not sticking around. I think a mama bear is going to attack you. I think if it was a mama bear that you stumbled on, you might not be here telling this story right now because
Yeah.
they
I
can
know.
be
I thought about
crazy.
that. I was like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
It, and I think that um, the problem that a lot of people have is they have to assign something to it. Like I've had a lot of weird stuff happen. When I'm in the woods that I can't necessarily even talk about as much as I've talked about with these two stories. Just in that area, with that abandoned house, the time I went by myself, sounded like a step upstairs. I think I was telling you about that. And I was
yeah.
like, I don't know what that was, but I'm getting out of here. And I took off through the thorns, and I didn't. It's not one of those abandoned houses where everybody, or the people go to do illegal things. It was tucked up in the woods, and there's no graffiti at all. Like, um, it's a very remote abandoned house,
Mm-hmm.
and you would hear people upstairs, and the upstairs, like I would have known before I went if somebody was up there. Just the way it's laid out, and there was no talking, and there was just a single step followed by like another partial step. And if it was an animal, it would scurry. And I know where the floor caves in, but like to me, I was like, that was just weird. I couldn't come up with any explanation. And I know it wasn't floor creaking. It wasn't the first time I was there, and I know what floor creaking sounds like. Um, and then there was another time that I was going in the woods, also right by there, and it was just like a weird feeling, and I was like, I'm probably not gonna go in here. I think sometimes you just someone's looking at you, and you just know they're looking. You turn around, and oh, there you see them. Like there's just instincts that we have. Um, and sometimes I'd feel fine and I'd walk right in. And then other times I was like, it's very quiet. Now I think maybe our senses pick up on things that, why am I not hearing birds? Why am I not hearing bugs? Why is it so eerily calm? And, uh, that triggers something, whether you realize it or not, in most people. And, you're the woods a lot, you notice more things. And there's times where that's happened. And I'm like, why? What big predators are around here? We might get coyotes, but they're not gonna make every insect silent.
No.
So
No. And that's I love that you said that because I say this on the show a lot too, is like your instincts, and there's something in our brains that even if we can't pinpoint it, like we know when something is off, whether it's we're seeing something in the sky or we're hearing a noise in an abandoned house or seeing something in the woods. Like we tend to know. And it's the same thing with like hunters, and again, I can understand you take a city person, someone who's never been in the woods before, and they go to summer camp for the first time and they get lost on a trail, and yeah, like everything in the woods is going to be freaky to them because
yeah,
they're just not used to it. But you
right.
have experienced hunters or fishermen or outdoors people, campers, who have been out there their entire lives and they have one incident or two incidents where it's just like, yeah, that night was weird. Like something was off. I felt like I was being watched. I felt like it was wrong. I packed up and I went home. Why?
Hmm.
Like you canceled the whole trip because you felt off. Like you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything. But I do think that our instincts really do kick in, and we know, like psychologically, we know when something is off. And that doesn't mean it's
Absolutely.
Bigfoot.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's paranormal, but yeah, something is off. And if your instincts are saying get out of there, then get out of there. I always tell people like follow your gut because it's
Yeah.
usually right.
Hmm.
And even if it's not,
It's
like what have you lost?
right. Yeah. I've there's been times when I would go up there almost every day, and it got to the point where my peripheral vision was I could pick up movements that were not the typical sway of the brush from the wind, and I'd see an animal, I'd see a squirrel, I'd see deer, I'd see birds, and just from exposure, it's cool how that happens. You really kind of get in tune with your surroundings. I mean, this is a well-known fact, and I would see deer, and then it still like happens now. Even driving, it's just like you can pick up on something that you see if you're used to being in the woods compared to somebody else. So
Mm-hmm.
the validity of, say, somebody who's never been in the woods compared to somebody who spends a lot of time in the woods, there's more validity to that. And there's people who have spent way more time in it than me, and will say similar things. That that's the nice thing about podcasts and the internet is it can just become a collective, ongoing research of compiling all this stuff together, and then the things that are consistent you can take a look at and maybe draw some conclusions from, or that's kind of how I came to this thought for my story, my friend's story, of just hearing other things, comparing it to these and other instances where weird stuff has happened, and saying, well, this could just been nothing. Could have been an animal that I could have been a predator that was watching me, and I was, coyote, and I just felt it. Or in other cases, a little more strange.
Yeah, and again, that's why I liked your story and your friend's story because it's they're not the sensational stuff that like we talked about, like you can find on Finding Bigfoot or I mean, some podcasts that's all they want to talk about is like it's not a good story unless there's a UFO and there's light orbs and there's a
Right.
chupacabra and 17 Bigfoot and the Bigfoot are carrying babies on their back and they come over for Sunday tea and uh,
Yep.
yeah, that gets clicks, it gets a certain audience, but for me I'm much more interested in the subtle stuff because I think that's more realistic to how a creature or a phenomenon is going to operate. It's not going to show up every Sunday and take the apples off your back deck. It's not going to be dropped
Hmm.
out of a UFO. uh, you're going to see a glimpse of something. You're going to see something stand up and run off on two legs and be like, what the hell was that? Like,
Hmm.
and again, your brain, even if you want to say that was a bear, your brain is saying, no, I got to text my friend Josh and tell him about this because I'm freaked out.
Right.
I won't say Bigfoot, but this was different. This was unusual.
Yeah.
And same thing with you. Like you're seeing this thing and your brain is telling you you're convincing yourself it's a bear, but your brain is also saying there's something different about this. Doesn't
Yeah.
seem like a bear. Uh, and I think it's important to give those stories equal voice and audience as well, because the sensational stuff just clouds the real research, because I don't think a lot of that stuff is real. I think certain people or podcasters or TV shows are going to embellish things because they got to beat the other guy and they got to make ratings and they want to sell
Right.
advertising dollars. Uh, but to have stories like this where people are just in the woods seeing something strange that they can't explain, they're not saying it's Bigfoot, but it adds to that collective, like you said, the collective data of just people are seeing things, people who are used to being in the woods, people who are in the woods all the time. And then they have one experience. They're not saying, yeah, I saw Bigfoot 37 times. They're saying, I had one experience. I went in the woods and I saw this thing. And what was it? Uh, And like you mentioned earlier, the hunters who give up hunting, or the ex-military guys who are like, I'm never going out there again. Like, you've seen
Yeah.
horrors of
Hmm.
war and you won't go into the the woods of Pennsylvania. Like,
That's it. It's interesting because my friend who had the story that I told for my friend, um, somebody who he knew. I guess he heard that he I think it was around the same time. I think he might have told the story to somebody he knew, and they told him about their grandpa who was in maybe the Korean War or something, and he was upstate New York, maybe Adirondack area, and something happened, and that's when he sold everything and just never went back. And
wow.
and so like I would bring that up to him, and I'd be like, dude, like, what do you think would cause that for somebody who? And he even said this guy had seen stuff in a war and wasn't afraid of anything. So yeah, and to do that, you got to have something that's like undeniable rather than just like a weird situation, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
these guys are not just seeing a bear from a weird angle and then saying, I'm giving up hunting for forever.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And
just
most people would, you see something like you're going to take a shot or you're at least
right.
going to raise your, but a lot of people have just like stopped in their tracks and just never, they don't take the shot. Some do, some don't, but it's, and who knows, there's some stories that come to mind I've heard online of similar to that. I think of the 411 uh guy, forget his name.
David
Um,
Politis.
yeah, yeah, that I listen to a lot of his stuff because again, he's a very analytical researcher, and he would just compile similarities of certain specific things, and they don't add up or line up. And he had to go into more of the conjecturing side because
Mm,
it's the only way you can get some kind of an idea of what's going on. It's weird patterns, and a lot of times hunters. I mean, he has series about the hunted. Um, all about hunters. So many
mm-hmm.
stories. But the one thing I learned from him is if you have a tracking device and a firearm, he has said he has not had a case of somebody going missing with a personal tracker and a firearm.
Right.
So, two things I tell people when they tell me they're going to go out on their own.
Yeah. And like
I
I
think
said earlier,
iPhones
like,
work now, so that's
yeah,
trackers.
exactly. But like I said earlier, like the one experience I've ever had was like when we were deep in the woods. It was the only trip where we were like, we're going real far. We have the dog. Let's not take the shotgun. Like, we're okay. And that's when something comes into camp.
Hmm.
And
Odd coincidence, maybe.
maybe, but a really weird coincidence that we've always had weapons and nothing. And then, like I said, we weren't being quiet. We were talking. We're throwing logs on the fire. We're joking around. Two big
Yeah.
guys, and this thing just walked right up to us and stared us down for like 6 7 minutes, and then slowly
Hmm.
walked on. And we were yelling, we were banging the sticks. Maybe it was a bear. I don't know. Maybe it was just a fearless bear. One of the few in the Adirondacks. But uh,
Yeah.
the size that we estimated it to be, and the fact that it didn't touch the food, and the fact that it didn't run off, it just. And again, we just had like a weird feeling about it. We were just like,
Hmm.
probably a bear, but like I said, when your brain tells you something is off, listen to that. And
Yeah, and the
that's
way you
kind of
said your dog acted, I know somebody who they take walks with their dog all the time, and their woods is not there's woods around them, but it wasn't any. Again, it was same kind of like where my story was. It wasn't like there was houses within a decent area, and they walked us all the time, and their dog stopped, and they were like, "What are you doing?" Dog looked at them, and the dog turned around and kept going the opposite direction. And this dog is not that kind of dog. This dog is like, let's go. I want to explore. And I was like, I would have said, yep, we're leaving. Because,
yeah.
they sense things that we can't sense as well as they do.
Oh, exactly. So that's also what kind of freaked me out, is that the dog is acting different. And you hear that in a lot of these Bigfoot stories, that my dog will go after everything. And then this one time my dog was just paralyzed. Like, it just would not move. It wouldn't get up. It wouldn't chase this thing. It wouldn't bark. It was just like terrified and quiet. So it
Yeah.
just makes you wonder. And again, none of this is proof that any of these things were Bigfoot, but again, like even with your friend's story, something stands up and runs. Like, well, let's rule out everything. Like, what's the biggest thing in Pennsylvania? A black bear. That's wild. Uh,
Yep.
So you're ruling out a
Yeah.
black bear, you're ruling out a person. What else are you left with? You rule everything out, and then again, it doesn't mean Bigfoot, but what the hell was it then? If it's not a bear and it's not a person, and
Yeah.
your friend
Yeah.
doesn't seem, I mean, if he's not giving you more details, he doesn't seem like someone who's pulling your leg. And again, when you have somebody pranking, there's always a payoff. There's always like, I got you, like
Yep.
jokes on
Something to
you,
gain.
haha.
And I think that he doesn't want to get into it because eventually you start putting the pieces in the puzzle together and you're cornered into accepting, not accepting, but at least accepting that it's just something that you don't know,
Mm-hmm.
something mysterious. You know, it's again back to Les Stroud. He says that when he would walk through in the dark and he would hear things, he would just talk himself into it was probably just a toad stepping on a leaf. It's probably just you know some even if it's a bear, they're just passing through. He's like, there's just wild animals. But he's like, there's a lot of stuff that I just couldn't explain, but he didn't want it in his show because that's not what his show was about.
Right.
And he didn't want it to be that way, which in my mind gives him more credibility. But it's the same thing, like there's people who you can't get famous off of Bigfoot anymore because there's so much out there.
Right.
So you really don't benefit from having some crazy story. You have to go to some elaborate lengths to be able to convince people and have dot all your I's and cross all your T's. And there's a lot more I's and T's now with all of this available information from podcasts and whatnot out there. So you really have to go to extreme lengths and spend money and time doing research to be able to get a good hoax.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, and if you're doing that, if you're hoaxing somebody, there's generally a payoff. There's generally,
Right.
and I've said this on the show before too, like why would somebody go into the woods, spend money on travel, spend money on fake footprints to go put footprints in a part of the woods that's so deep that nobody may ever see it? Like if you're going to do that, you're going to go do that like in your buddy's backyard. And like so when he wakes up in the morning, it's like, oh my God, Bigfoot was in my yard. And then they,
Right.
ha ha, no, it was just me. why
Yeah.
why go to the lengths to go miles and miles into the woods where the likelihood of anybody even seeing it is close to zero?
Yeah, you'd have to know someone was going there to begin with.
Right. And you hear a lot of these stories where people are like, yeah, I didn't tell anybody I was going. I just woke up one day and was like, hey, I'm going to go hike this trail. And they go deep in the woods and they find footprints or they see something. And it's like, the guy's not going to be 4 miles into a trail in a gorilla suit trying to scare somebody when it's not a
Right.
popular trail. And like, yeah, I'm going to sit here all day and like nobody's probably going to come.
And maybe it does happen once, but it's not going to happen again and again in different areas.
Exactly. All over the country, all over the world for decades and decades and decades. Like, and the skeptics will have you believe that that's what it is. Like there's some secret society out there of guys who just strap on, fake Bigfoot feet and stomp all over the world. And that is far more far-fetched than just believing that Bigfoot exists.
I know. You got to have more hurdles to believe that it's a hoax.
Exactly. And again, many stories I believe are probably misidentifications. I'm sure there's some people out there who just get their jollies by going on the BFRO website and leaving a fake story.
Right.
But there's hundreds and thousands of these stories out there. So even if you take away the hoaxes, even if you take away the misidentifications, what you're left with is still a huge database of stories and experiences that you cannot explain. So,
hmm
uh,
Yeah, and that's the availability for that now is and the ease of being able to tell stories
yeah,
helps. You'd think that it would mean more hoaxes, but I again, there's no benefit. I'm not going to go write an anonymous post to not gain something from it, And if there are people who do that, the internet is very good at sniffing things out.
right. And again, why are people giving up an hour of their time to go on podcasts or write out lengthy story? I mean, you've been on the BFRO website. Some of those stories are paragraphs long.
hmm
Why
Yeah.
would somebody take the time to write that out or go on podcasts sometimes multiple podcasts, take time out of their day away from their family, and then there's no payoff. They never come back and say, "Hey, I went on this podcast and I totally, faked this guy out."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even
There's no
then, no,
money, no fame.
there's no money, there's no fame, and then even then, people are going to be like, "All right, so you lied to a podcaster or you lied on the
Right.
internet. Who cares? Like, you wasted some guy's time and your own for what? Did you make money off of it? Did you get fame? Where's the payoff?" So, yeah, I don't doubt that there are hoaxes out there because people are crazy, people are insane. Some people just have nothing better to do than be trolls. But I think it's a very small percentage of what's out there. So,
Yeah,
um,
I definitely agree.
yeah. So do you think, before I let you go, do you think Bigfoot is a natural creature? Do you think it's more paranormal, or do you think it's like somewhere in between? Or what do you think?
I've listened to probably hundreds of people's ideas on what it was or is, and I am not going to say what I think it specifically is, but I definitely don't think it's just a physical thing.
Mm-hmm.
My coming a being brought up in a church Christian background, it used to not align
Mm-hmm.
with that, but there has been a lot out there with a lot of the bigger podcasts, and now other podcasts starting to pick that topic up that adopt a specific view of Bigfoot and just other things that happen. And I'd say that I more closely align with their those ideas than it
Mm-hmm.
being physical or than it being a. I think there's a guy that in one of the episodes that Les Stroud did with his Bigfoot Survivorman series that talks about it without getting because I mean you can go way into the weeds.
Oh yeah.
There's many hours of podcasts about it, but I'd say that I lean towards that way.
Okay.
Just say into that large pool of other smaller ideas that branch off of it. But I would say I'd lean more towards not being just a physical being, but something a little bit more that still aligns with sort of like a biblical outlook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or not biblical, but like a Christian viewpoint of how it could exist. It's hard to explain exactly where it falls, but I have my beliefs, and it can still fit. Is more or less how I'm viewing it.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I mean, not to get too much into that side of things, but I think religion has come a long way with that, as far as even other things like evolution and other science. And like, it used to just be like, way back in the day, religion and science were kind of these mutually exclusive things, where I think now, uh, you can still be religious and believe in science and be like, there's intelligent design here. There's, God had if you believe in God, then it had, he or she or whatever it is, had a hand in the science. So I think there's definitely more room for overlap now, and people are more accepting of that. And I used to run into this too with like ghost hunting, and very religious people would not believe in ghosts, and now I think that's much more accepted. So uh, just opening minds, and sort of saying, yeah, like maybe there is room for this. Uh, and at the end of the day, none of us really know. It's all just opinion. It's all just what side of uh, the ideology you fall on and believe it to be. And again, I
Mm,
tend to fall more into the biological animal thing, but like I said earlier, I will admit that there are aspects of it that don't make sense for a biological animal. So I have to at least be open to other possibilities, even if I don't necessarily subscribe to them currently. But if
right.
new evidence comes
It
out and
took me a while to get to even considering that
mm-hmm.
as a possibility. Um, and again, all never claims, all just conjecture. Like I like to say that a lot because I don't like to say this is what I believe is true or this is true.
Hmm.
But kind of back to what you said about religion and science, specifically like Christianity. Like, I mean, Werner Heisenberg, he said, the first gulp from a glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And
Hmm.
him being so involved with like he's a quantum physicist, and just somebody like that's really digging in and dedicating their life to something like that and saying that, I think that might be what's causing sort of this like, well, we say that God created everything. Why are we saying that? Why are we putting these limits on what He created? And that's where my views come from. I'm not going to say again yes or no, but I'm not also not going to put limitations on it. At the end of the day, it's cool in my opinion. It doesn't change the way that I live a ton. I'm just not gonna go hiking without some form of protection with
Yeah,
me
yeah.
and telling somebody where I'm going. Um, I didn't used to do that, and a pocket knife's not gonna do much.
No.
So for
No,
me, it's
so
just a really cool, interesting topic. That I like to talk about things that are, I sit at a desk all day. I see stuff that is not fun and exciting. So this is what this is for me.
yeah, no, everybody needs some excitement. And yeah, I think we all do it. We all put on a podcast or two or five during the day and just
Yeah, yeah.
try to explore the possibilities and open our minds a little bit to what could be out there, you know?
Hmm.
So yeah, awesome.
For
Well,
sure.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Like I said, I loved your stories. Reminded me a lot of mine. And I think they deserve a voice because even the subtle stories need, to be told because I think they're just as important as all the other noise that's out there.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I completely agree. Same reason I started looking into local stuff is, I think it would be so cool to have to do those town halls. I think that's the only thing that I really liked about that Finding Bigfoot, and you know, having some discernment to weed through some, crap that people are gonna say. I'm not gonna offer any kind of benefit. So if they want to tell a story, they go ahead. But I just think it'd be so cool to get a collective idea in a local area, and maybe somebody's like, "Hey, yeah, I had a similar situation, and yeah, around this time," and it's like, "Wow, look at that." No, no way of knowing. You can't search that on the internet. So that's hopefully this can turn into more of a local sharing experience some way, somehow for many areas.
Yeah, I hope so because again, I think a lot of people feel like if it's not this grandiose sighting, they don't want to report it
Right.
because they say, yeah, it's something simple. But yeah, if you come forward with your story, then maybe somebody else around that same time hears my show and hears your story and says, oh, you know what? It was probably around that time that I saw something. Let me talk to these people. Let me put something online. Let me tell my
Hmm.
story too, because then you have the corroboration of not just you seeing something, but now you have someone else, and then maybe that triggers someone else, and then before you know it, yeah, like you said, you have this sort of community coming together and sharing
Yeah.
their experiences. So yeah, no, I
Yeah.
really do appreciate it though.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, man. So anything else you want to share? I mean, I think those are your stories though, right? I don't,
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's everything. Uh, yep.
all right, cool. So yeah, thank you once again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And
Hmm.
stay in touch. If you see anything else, let me know.
Hey, will do. Will do.
All right, man. Thanks again.
Yeah. Have a good one. Thank
All
you.
right, you too. Take care. All right, everybody. I want to thank Josh for coming on the show. Awesome guy, awesome stories. We had a really nice phone conversation the week before recording this. And yeah, he shared his stories and good guy, good stories. So, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. What do you guys think of Josh's stories? I think they're really cool. I love these stories where they're just more subtle and there's just something off about them. Uh, obviously, any of us, if we're talking Bigfoot, would prefer to have seen it. Like I know in my experience, whatever we were looking at that time, me and my other friend Josh, uh, you know, I would have preferred to have seen it. So I could definitely say, yeah, that was a large humanoid or that was just a bear. I don't know if Josh would rather have seen it or not. But I love these stories. I love just, and his friend's story about the thing standing up and running. And then his friend is just kind of shutting down, doesn't want to share any more information because it's like almost too much to admit. So love stories like that. So until next time, everybody, enjoy spooky season, question everything. Did Josh see Bigfoot? Did his friend see Bigfoot? Uh, did I see Bigfoot? I don't know. I'll link to my story down below as well, so you guys can go back and check out that one too. So yeah, question everything. Embrace the weird, everybody. Spooky season. Does Bigfoot exist? Let me know what you think. Till next time, rock and roll, everybody.